Agoko, Riakoria, Yevagoko, Yanyoko, Amazia, Anao, Maya, Evagoko, Yaviaga, Nakio, Yevagoko, Yanaka, Yomoro,
My name is Lois Kamoy. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and when I started teaching, I moved to Ann Arbor. I met my husband, David, who was a foreign student here from Kenya. My grandmother, who was born in England in 1879, when I told her I was going to marry an African, first she wanted to know which country in Africa. And I told her Kenya, and she was happy because that had been a British colony. Said, oh, then perhaps he speaks the Queen's English. And I said, yes. I said, better than I do. But she wanted to know if he went to a British boarding school, and he did. And I said he won the Best Actor Award in the Shakespeare Festival. And she said, oh, well. Then if anyone on the American side of your family, which would be my father's side, should criticize this marriage, you remind them that your mother was the product of an interracial marriage, and she came out all right, even if I do say so myself. And I must have looked confused because she said, you know, your grandfather was Irish. To her, that was an interracial marriage, and she had cousins who never spoke to her again because she married an Irishman.
Today, the United States Supreme Court handed down a decision. The Lovings ordeal is at last over. Richard and Mildred Loving have won the right to be man and wife, father and mother in the state of Virginia. Anti-miscegenation laws have been declared illegal not only in Virginia, but in all 16 states that have held such statutes.
The Racial Integrity Act that was passed in 1924 prohibited people from marrying from different races. That was really about stopping people from coming together, marrying, and then diluting the bloodstream. The people in Virginia were very concerned about their whiteness.
It's sort of a matter of time. In her day, that was very much an interracial marriage. It was also state by state. So it became legal in different states at different times, and then I think there was some kind of a federal ruling that made it legal everywhere, even if the state hadn't made its state laws up to date. It was, I think, illegal when we met, but by the time we got married, it had been legal for maybe half a year or a year, something like that. It was actually, when we first got married, we were in Nairobi, so we didn't have to deal with licenses here. We wanted to live in Nairobi, or David wanted to, and I wanted to see what life was like there before I committed to that. So I went there and took a summer class at the University of Nairobi. So we got married in August. I came back, collected my stuff, and moved back to Nairobi. And we were there for a couple of years before things got politically very bad, and we came back here. Coming back here, there really wasn't that much of a problem, I think, because we were in Ann Arbor. And I didn't really realize how much it might be a problem somewhere else, because Ann Arbor's sort of a bubble, and it's very diverse and very friendly. The other thing is that David was African and not African American, so his friends tended to be African. We didn't run into any real problems other than a couple of kind of hostile remarks from African American women who felt that black men should not go out with white women because that was stealing their men or something. I only had that happen a couple of times, but in general, people didn't have a problem. David's parents were separated, and his mother was ostracized because of some family history on their side. His father came to visit a couple of times. On my side, my mother was very opposed in the beginning, And my dad wasn't really concerned, but he didn't want my mother to be upset. And my mother wasn't speaking to me, but my father would talk to me on the phone. And really, he was being the messenger. He'd tell me how my mother was doing, what she was saying. So it was like talking to my mother through my father. When Aisha was about 5 years old, we were going to go to St. Louis to visit my parents and grandmother. I decided it would be good if we took the train. So we rode the train. I thought I could point out all the different crops that were growing along the way and make it an educational experience. And we got off the train, and I started worrying that maybe I had forgotten to put some piece of clothing on because people were staring at us, and I didn't know why. And then I thought maybe it was Aisha. And so I had her walk ahead to see if the sun was making, too much, making her dress too transparent, but she looked all right. And so then we saw my friend Marion, who had come to pick us up. And I said, "Quick, Marion, what am I not wearing?" And she said, "Why? You look all right." I said, "Because people are staring, and I think I'm not wearing something." She said, "You idiot." They're staring because you're white and you've got this mixed girl with you. I went, "Oh." Because in Ann Arbor, that never happened. I just thought that's so stupid. But anyway. No, I don't think I was wrong. I think she was just kind of stuck in her ways. She also had very kind of backward ideas about women's roles and things like that. So I was already used to sort of going my own way and trying not to be restricted by that. My friends were very supportive. They absolutely loved David. He was very funny and kept everything alive, very intelligent, loved to talk, loved to argue. He didn't expect opposition. He had just lived a lifetime of getting approval after approval, and he just thought everything he did would be approved. But he had political ambitions. He refused to openly admit them, but it was obvious. So then there was opposition that they didn't want a white first lady or a white minister's wife. So there was opposition to me, and his version eventually of solving this was he should become polygamist and take on wives who were from his tribe that would give him support by finding one from each of the Kikuyu areas. He didn't come up with that idea until we were leaving. And he thought that would get him back in the good graces of people in the party, and that would bring him political success. And that's really what separated us, because I said if he wanted to do that, he wouldn't be doing it with me. And so, goodbye. Yeah. Hostility toward relationships like that really come from people who are just trying to divide, and it isn't natural. Most people will just get along once they get to know each other, and I think that that kind of discrimination is eventually going to melt away, and it also is impractical because the world is getting smaller in business terms, and people are going to have to work with people from other cultures. And those who have no experience working with other cultures are going to be at a distinct disadvantage. And so economically, it's not very wise to go down a prejudiced path because it's like shooting yourself in the foot. And socially, it's disappearing, and younger people see it for the stupidity it is, and it'll disappear.